Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Writers Infusion. I'm your host, Susan. I'm here with the usual critiquers, Dave, Jen, Julie, and Ed. And today we have our writer in here with us in the studio. This is Maggie Ferguson, so welcome Maggie to our show.
Thanks.
We just want to ask Maggie a couple of questions. So you're a writer.
Right.
And you told us off screen that you just started an MFA program.
Yeah.
How is it going?
It's going well. It's at Emerson College, and I just finished my first year, and it's been really good for my writing.
That's terrific. That's a great school.
Thanks.
And Julie asked a question off camera too. This story takes place in Paris, and you've been to Paris.
Yes.
How long were you there for?
I studied abroad there, so I was there for 6 months, more or less, in 2009.
Do you speak fluent French?
Not fluent, but I speak it kind of well.
That's terrific.
Something.
That's awesome. Some of us have been to Paris. I love it there. It's beautiful.
This story was originally in French, but we translated it to English for you.
Yeah.
But Julie's going to read it in French.
Right.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we'll have you read the summary and the excerpt, and then we'll start the critique.
Sounds great.
Okay, thanks.
So the summary. Felix is a French writer living in Paris who believes he has everything in order, a beautiful girlfriend, a paying job, and a novel he's working on. But when he moves in with his girlfriend, cravings start. There's something that he wants that he can't find. Story. Felix gave his heart to his city, and he could not imagine he would ever want it back. On the walk home under the pale rosy Paris dawn, bakeries churned out breads and pastries, and the smell of rising yeast filled the streets. In his youth, Felix would have knocked at the rear door of a bakery and offered cash for a takeaway breakfast. He considered suggesting it to Juliet, who, tucked under his arm, was half asleep, but he already knew she'd say no. They hadn't meant to stay out all night. He pulled her closer. He was moving in with her. After a year together, they'd agreed to start cohabitating, when Felix's "my lease is up" met with Juliet's raised eyebrows. "I'm searching for something close to you," he said. She had feigned nonchalance, cavalierly setting out a candlelit romantic dinner for two, as picture-perfect as a magazine, but her hands had shaken, and seeing that, Felix had taken her hands in his. She'd planned to ask over dessert, but the proposal tumbled out instead. "My apartment is large enough for two." Juliet had inherited her 3-room flat in the 16th arrondissement from her family. Her offer rescued him from the headache of hunting for a new home. Parisian real estate was so like the city, in near constant construction, remodeling, and removing, a mercurial landscape. Felix spent most nights at Juliet's anyway. A small collection of belongings, mostly books, waited to follow his migration. Felix's longtime friend and co-worker, Remy, had agreed to help him move in exchange for a dinner, a fine wine, and a selection of aged cheeses. Remy was half Egyptian and half Spanish, spoke 4 languages fluently and an additional 2 partially. It was a skill set that translated into an affable ability to speak with anyone, anywhere. He was also one of the few rare, cherished people Felix knew with a car. Later that afternoon, Remy eased his old Renault, full of Felix's boxes, into a small spot sandwiched between a Tesla and a Peugeot. From her 6th-story window, gripping a wrought iron railing, Juliet leaned out and waved down to Remy and Felix. Her long hair dangled down as if to reach down to Felix to invite him up. She seemed fearless and disregarding of her safety, her torso hovering over the pavement below. With the sun behind her, Felix couldn't tell if she was smiling or laughing. He had to imagine her grin. "No elevator?" Remy asked for the 20th time. "No, and pay attention. Sometimes there's a cat on the stairs. Anything else, like loose boards, sharp nails, a madwoman in the attic?" Felix shrugged, pretending he'd forgotten the staircase narrowed after the 3rd floor. He didn't mention the timer on the staircase either, so when the light flickered off, Remy cursed and smacked the wall until he found a switch. Felix and Remy had a similar build. They were long and lean and slim and in shape, so Felix was surprised when, after mastering 3 trips up the stairs, Remy collapsed on Juliet's couch and insisted Felix should have hired someone. 1 couch would have been easier than 10 boxes of books, he claimed. Juliet, who, when asked to help, had noted, "But those boxes are too heavy for me? What help could I be?" Praised Remy, and rewarded him with tea while Felix continued to lug boxes of his belongings up 6 flights of stairs alone. By the time he stacked his last box on Juliet's spacious hardwood floor, sweat pasted his button down to his skin. 2 couches and a television framed the front half of the room. A dining table with chairs sat on the other. Persian rugs covered wooden floors. Flowered blue wallpaper plastered the walls, peeling and cracking in spots. In winter, radiators heated the place, but they couldn't reach every chilly, drafty corner, in part because of the large, door-like windows that filled the opposite wall and funneled natural light throughout the room. Juliet had sequestered a corner with a folding Japanese print screen of a bamboo in every season. This was to be Felix's spot in the apartment. He would bring a desk and a chair and write by the window. While he worked, Juliet and Remy had settled together at the dining room table and sipped tea with their backs to the entryway and Felix. "So, Felix has submitted all of his change of address forms?" Remy asked. He leaned over the table to get closer to Juliet. When Juliet nodded, he said, "Shame. You wouldn't want to live with me?" Juliet asked. Felix tilted his head back, so he was scowling at the ceiling. He headed to grab a towel to wipe off some of the sweat. Juliet flirted with everyone, and he thought maybe since he was huffing like a draft horse after bearing all those boxes of books up the stairs, she should see him and knock it off. He agreed with her that everyone should be in love with her, but to see her flirt never failed to make him jealous. "I would love nothing more. Where will Felix stay?" Juliet laughed. Felix pulled a towel from the hallway linen closet and turned back in time to see her hand brush Remy's arm. "Felix will stay here, of course." Remy shrugged. "Okay, but Felix sleeps on the couch." Felix cleared his throat. Remy had charm and loved to flirt. He had a square jaw and a smile like a diamond. For as long as they'd been friends, Remy had prided himself on a playful rapport with the fair sex. Felix wished he would practice on someone other than Juliet. While Remy could captivate anyone, he well knew that Felix struggled with women, and how much he prized Juliet. "Felix," Remy raved him in, "you know my upstairs neighbor Claude moved to the Colorado in the United States. It's not too late to rent his apartment." "Why would I want that?" Felix asked. He crossed his arms. "When I can let some loud family rent it and torment you by stomping on the floorboards at all hours." "1 week here," Juliet's eyes narrowed, "and Felix will never want to leave." He crossed the room to kiss her. If working Monday after spending a weekend spent moving and then unpacking didn't offer enough torture for Felix, Felix suffered from a gnawing craving for something with cinnamon. When he woke in the early dark, he smelled cinnamon but brushed it off. He had a bowl of cafe au lait and a slice of Nutella toast and fully expected the craving to desert him over the course of the morning. It didn't. Instead, it clung to him as he slogged through editing typos out of advertisements and enduring meetings where he would have napped if the lingering craving hadn't needled him awake. Lunch approached and he listed off foods containing cinnamon. Cookies, onion soup, coffee cake, the vaguely insatiable desire frustrated him. Who craved cinnamon? Maybe he was confusing cinnamon and apple tarts? He had a nagging feeling that cinnamon had been an ingredient in some treat he couldn't remember. Why it should reappear now, he had no idea. He needed to focus. He brought his lunch to the office, a ham baguette, and planned to stay there in order to meet his deadline. The week before, he'd accidentally missed one deadline when a simple slogan for a milk poster had spawned an ardent love poem to Juliet. His afternoon had disappeared in a lyrical page to her. He'd imagined she would be pleased, flattered, spouting praise for him and his writing, but that hadn't been her exact reaction. "It's not bad," she said when she'd seen it and held it to her nose and squinted. She'd sniffed it as if expecting it to smell. "You mix your T's and L's in your handwriting." The disappointment Felix felt came out in one long sigh. If her feedback dwelled on his penmanship, then Felix would focus on his work and not risk another deadline. He'd kept his resolve until an improbable cinnamon craving distracted him. "You aren't focusing," Remy said. He stopped to visit Felix's desk on the way to some meeting. They worked for the same company, but Remy wore a suit, his job a mix of sales and PR and marketing instead of copy. "Go for a walk."
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have to read a lot in school when you're,
No.
people don't usually read out loud?
No.
Does it give you a different feel to the story?
You'll catch a lot more errors when you read it out loud.
That's what we
good
always
point.
noticed too.
It's true.
That's very true.
So, I'll start. So, I wanted to point out first of all that you have some really good sentences here. I mean, even the second one about under the pale rosy Paris dawn, bakeries churned out breads and pastries, and the smell of rising yeast fills the streets. Just makes you want to go there right away. And good verbs like churned, and so that's really good. And I noticed that throughout. I guess I'd start with where's the story really starting? So you have they're walking home.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little piece on them walking home, and then there's a little piece on Felix telling us that she asked him. But then those are just two little pieces. The first time we really get into a scene is when he's actually moving in. And I think it's really important when you're starting off your story that right away we want to get to know the characters. And when you do that through telling, which is what you're doing at the beginning, that doesn't help us identify enough with the character. So I guess I'd start off with where should the story start? Should it start with when Juliet's asked, maybe at dinner when she's asking him to move in? Or does it start right when it's move-in day and you're starting there? And I'll point out different things, but decide where you want to start and then kind of go Ed will always say, go chronologically from there. So that we can identify with him. And the more dialogue that you use interspersed with his feelings, the more we're identifying right away with him as opposed to just having a summary. So, and we'll point out, different things here, but that's where I wanted to start. So does anyone want to take off from that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that a lot of this is skipping over the most important and interesting parts. I mean, here's a vital part of their relationship, or a vital event in their relationship, talking about living together. That should be a scene, not just a couple of sentences in a paragraph. So my overall suggestion for this is slow down, take your time, give us each scene, set it, where is it taking place, who's there, what's going on, and then let it develop. Let us see these people, talking, interacting with each other, and so forth. Because right now it seems like it's kind of, skipping, tag this happened, tag this happened, tag this happened. But these are important things. These are important things going on in their lives, and it's the parts that the readers will find most interesting. To see that interaction going on. So the more you can write about that, I think the better.
I mean, they're moving in together, and I really want to see what is their relationship like.
Yes.
Because right now, after a few pages, I feel like I don't like Juliet because she was flirting. So I can't really. I don't have to like her, but I don't really like her because I just don't like the flirting. That would bother me. Remy went right along with it, and here's they're moving in, and already she's flirting with another guy, and not even showing that she cares that he's moving in. I mean, I don't even like her. So that's okay if I don't like the two of them, but now I have nothing to say, okay, if I'm going to keep reading this, then I want to feel badly for Felix and see what is he going to do about this. So I think if you had more of a scene where we're getting to know Felix and identifying with him and feeling for him more, then when Juliet's introduced and she's being like that, or Remy's being like that, then I'm invested in him already. But because he's telling here more, I'm not invested enough in him, and then I don't like the other two, and then that makes it harder for me to want to continue.
Also, that scene is interesting from the point of view that this can't be the first time this has happened. He's been seeing Juliet for a long time. Remy is his best friend. They've obviously encountered each other many, many times before. So this isn't something new. I mean, it's written here as if it's something new, but it can't possibly be something new. So,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
The best line of all 5 pages, the bottom of page 2. Anything else? Loose boards, sharp nails, a mad woman in the attic. That's very clever. If you could do more of that. You don't have to infuse humor into everything, but have it real conversation. I need to hear, I think a reader wants to hear interaction between Juliet and Felix. Interesting choice of names, Juliet, by the way. You have her up on the 6th floor looking over a balcony, very Juliet-esque. And then in the same paragraph, you have her hair cascading like Rapunzel. I was confused by your allusions. I studied in Paris. That was the French reference we made earlier. In the 16th arrondissement, it's beautiful. And I wish that you would tell more about Paris. You mentioned the buildings and how everything's turned over in construction, but there are some gorgeous old edifices that are long-standing. And the people and the vibrant colors and the history in that city. Please add, because that's a character in and of itself. And I'm glad to know you're doing a Master's of Fine Arts, because I'd like to make this reference. And with all due respect, it seems like a mundane, as in mold of the world, common, not boring, but a mundane painting on a canvas. These characters are just painted there. and I want them to jump out. I want them to be three-dimensional. And you can do it. We just don't know enough about them. The friendship between Felix and Remy, and Juliet and Felix's romance. We really want to be flies on the wall, be in the room, living it with them. And you just need to insert that in places.
Yeah, I wanted to see more about Paris also. I mean, I'm not getting Paris at all here. I mean, they're strolling down the street. This is the Rue de la Brie or something. And
That's a nice street.
It has shops, it has bistros, it has geraniums and flower
Yes.
boxes,
Yes.
and this could be Norwood, which to the people at home,
Which is a
Norwood
lovely
is not
town.
Paris.
Lovely town.
We love
So,
Norwood.
It's a lovely
Mustangs.
town.
Yeah, I mean, if you're setting a story in Paris, we have to have a lot of Paris.
That's
Yes.
a character.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Paris is a character, and that's the first line of my commentary. Paris is loaded with meaning. We all come to the story knowing something about Paris. You have to help us figure out why they are in Paris, who they are, where they go, what they see. Take us. Literature is people. The romance with the city, and the first line gave his heart to the city. There's a relationship there. Why? What is there for him? I'm having a hard time. There are a bunch of other things that we can talk about, but I'm having a hard time figuring out why Juliet isn't inviting Remy to move in. She has dumped on his poem. She's not helping him move in. She doesn't seem even enthusiastic about his moving in. Remy, on the other hand, is slick and cool, and she likes him, and the descriptions are far more positive on Remy than they are with
Felix.
Felix. See, I forgot his name.
That's how much of an impact he made on you.
I think so, yeah, and that may be a problem. We don't have to like the characters, but we have to understand them and root for them in one way or another, like overcoming something. If someone were to ask me what this story is about after 5 pages, I'd have to say, I don't know. I see some relationship situations, I see some city situations, moving in, but it's not enough of a story. And truly, after 5, and I've learned through going to critiques in the past and listening to agents and so on, if you're not nailing it down in the first couple of pages, you've lost the audience.
Right.
So I'm concerned that this beautiful setting and these interesting characters in this novel situation, moving in is a novel situation, and there should be an element of brightness there, that you're missing out on that. The second thing is, I don't get the implication of the cinnamon lust.
I don't either.
It seems like something stuck on to help you write the story or something. I don't know why it's there. And it has to be a passion, and we have to be with the passion and understand the passion.
Mm-hmm.
What you've told us is I'm hungry for cinnamon rolls all the time. But it's not for real, sure. And sticky buns, and you name it. But it's not as if it's going to change my life. Here it seems terribly important. I'm wondering if he has a brain tumor. He's smelling odd things.
Oh, I wasn't.
I-
Wow. That's interesting.
Well, that's
That's a
what.
storyline.
what
I was
he-
thinking it was being
That's an
poisoned.
indicator?
Huh?
That's an indicator?
Yes.
Wow.
Weird smells, or unusual things out of nowhere. So again, I think you have wonderful elements of a story. If you would think in terms of scenes as opposed to this flowing dialogue,
Narrative.
narrative, this flowing narrative. Think in terms of scenes where something happens. At the end of the scene, I can say, I just learned this about them. Then on to the next scene, and so on. They can be very short scenes, but chunks of ideas that assemble into one huge puzzle that I'll understand. But right now, I like the people. No, I like reading about the people. I like the city. The description should be far more clear. And I think you've got a lot to work with. I think it needs work, though. So.
And then So far, if you're hearing overall that we're saying break this into a longer scene,
Right.
Not just one paragraph when they're getting together, or when she's asking him, because then that could be a whole thing. We could see their relationship, we can see how she's nervous to ask him. I need to know how old they are, because I don't know that at all. And then maybe she's younger than he is. It kind of sounds like that, but I'm not sure. So then, what was the point I was making? So then when he's moving in, there's a place that she's arranged for him where he's got the screen. So when he is moving, maybe have something where he's moving his stuff into that corner, because if he's a writer, setting up his new area to write in is huge, and connects him to his new home, and then you see how she's reacting to him. I mean, if it were me, I'd be excited to say, look, I created this area for you, what do you think? And he's setting it up. So those are opportunities to expand upon what their relationship is like and how he's feeling about
And that's where to
moving
put in
in.
description also. I mean, there's a paragraph of description of the apartment that just kind of sits there. That it's not there for any purpose.
Right.
But if he's coming in and he's looking at, oh, I could put a chair here, I could, right now there's this.
Or he's even doing
or-
it, right?
Yeah,
He
or
actually
something.
moves over there to
But
set
that
up
gives you
his
an
things.
opportunity. He's coming
use
into this
that.
new place. He's looking at it. Then you can describe what's there.
And speaking of that corner, where he writes, you used the word sequestered, and I have a couple of notes on word choice that you may have found a better word. Cordoned off or partitioned, I thought might be better. Sequestered, it's often used with quarantine or illness and ailment or something negative. I apologize.
That's okay. So, I mean, I think everybody touched upon what I was going to say, but Dave said something important that I want to ask you. So, in 3 sentences, this is a novel, correct? Is this a novel or a short story?
Novel.
All right. In 3 sentences, what is your story about?
My current plan, which may change.
Okay. And it does change with revision, but right now, what's your story about?
Is Felix is a French writer living in Paris in about 2010, and he is getting further and further along with Juliet, and they start talking about marriage, but he meets his actual muse, and this upsets his life, and meanwhile a volcano goes off right in April, in sectioning off all air travel, which is important because his muse is from the U.S. and gets stuck there with him.
Okay. So it's a love triangle, love story. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So the cinnamon, is the cinnamon significant?
So the
To the
cinnamon
story?
is because the muse is baking cinnamon.
Oh.
Okay. All right. Does the muse?
I know.
So
it's-
he has
it's
some
an
type of.
organization.
No, it's okay. So there's some type of telepathic connection
Right.
with them. He's okay. So
So-
that's helpful. So
Things get weird.
so
It's very
so
helpful
then
to
I
know
think. See, I thought the moving in part went on way too long, and I know everyone was
Yeah.
asking for more, but I thought it was like, we don't need to know the boxes are going up the stairs. I don't need to know what the stairway looks like.
Okay.
I just wanted to get on with the story, and I was I felt like I was jumping in time. So,
Yeah.
you know, they're coming home at night, and then he's kind of looking back to when they moved in, and then he's at work with the cinnamon, and I wasn't sure were they out at night before the cinnamon thing started? Was it after? So I would say, you know, if the cinnamon is, if the story really is about the muse, I would say not start with the scene with him moving in. I would start with the craving for cinnamon, and then maybe do the moving in as a backstory type of thing. Because really the story is about him and the muse. Juliet is somewhat secondary, and she's going to create some conflict, right? Because but really the muse is the story. It's what it sounds like. So I would start with the craving for cinnamon. Like your first line might be, Felix woke up with a strange craving for cinnamon. I don't know.
I think you need to work it into the story, though, because right now there's a paragraph about it. I think it kind of needs to be interwoven
Yeah.
into the scene.
A little lighter.
Just a little by little, where he
Yeah.
can't get it out of his mind, no matter, and he's wondering the whole time, why is this going on?
But that's an interesting situation, the way you
Yeah, it is.
describe
That
it.
is, thank
because
you.
It's
To have
good.
this other person come in, and that kind of gives the Juliet, Felix, Remy situation a different spin if somebody else comes in that Felix might be interested in. So that's clever. That's good.
Well, if Remy and Juliet are so hung up on each other, wouldn't it be easy for Felix to leave that? So if you don't want it to be easy to do that, we need to see more of his relationship to Juliet and why he wouldn't want to just take off.
Right.
See, I took it like they were just kind of messing with him. Like, I didn't feel like they were really flirting.
Right.
I took it like they knew he was there. Remy's not going to seriously say, hey, why don't you take the other apartment and I'll move in with
But
Juliet.
we're not invested in them first.
But I took it but my interpretation of that is they were just messing with him.
Right.
Like, they knew he was there.
But we're not invested in their relationship first.
no.
Maybe if we had seen
I hear
that
ya.
scene at the dinner table first, then it would come across like
Yeah.
that.
And Felix's jealousy is noted.
Yeah.
It's duly noted.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, right, because he's kind of unsure in this relationship in a way too.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, but different things. I mean, this setup gives you all kinds of opportunities for things, because the fact that there's somebody else interested in Felix, that might change Juliet's mind.
That's
to
true.
see that somebody else is interested in him,
Right.
that might make her more interested in him.
Well, if the muse is interested in him at all.
Right.
Ah,
That's
right.
right.
Well, she must.
Yeah. Maggie didn't tip
there's
her
lots,
hand. We
lots
don't
of ways
know.
you
I
can
don't
go
know.
with this.
Do you have any questions for us?
Any questions? So one thing that we've talked about in workshop before is that in a sort of opening, you probably don't want backstory. You probably do want all scene. So would you have any advice for how to stick to that? Of sort of avoiding backstory in,
So
in
there's
the opening.
I did do a blog on backstory, and I do
Jen
have a
did.
list of questions to ask yourself.
Right.
So, for
On our
example, so you have them walking through Paris, and then you go back in time to the move-in. So that's backstory. So you have to ask yourself, who wants to insert this here? Is it Felix that wants to insert this scene here, or is it the narrator or the author? Why does the reader need to know this now?
Okay.
Do they need to know this now?
Yeah.
And so why do they need to know this now? Can it happen later? And there's a series of like 5 questions to ask yourself, and what the right answer should be if it truly does belong here. But you don't want it to be an info dump. So is the moving in scene crucial that the reader know it on the first page?
Can I add to that too?
Yeah.
And you should check out our website because Jen wrote a great book about
Check the time.
Yes, the time.
Oh,
We
yeah.
have to wrap it up.
No, but let's answer.
But the one thing I want to say is that sometimes just go forward with the rest of your story. Sometimes when you're done, that's when you're capable of going back and saying,
You
I
get
didn't
clarity.
really need that.
Yes. Yeah.
So I wouldn't
Yes.
worry about it
Yeah.
so much yet.
Not
I
your
would
first
worry about it
draft.
at the right.
Yeah.
I would worry about it after first draft.
Yeah.
And that will help you situate yourself a little bit better.
Get it all down first.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's the challenging part.
Do you have your
biggest-
first draft? Do you have it? No. Okay. All right.
Yeah, the biggest suggestion I can give to starting a book off is nothing that we can say will convince you of something to do. Go to Barnes & Noble and choose 10 popular novels. Read the first page of each. You will find that in that first page, you will have so much information that you can connect the dots. You don't have to be told. You'll be able to connect the dots, and you will take off from that first page. It's a remarkable education. I've done that before, and when I forget, I go back to it over and over again. Just read the first page of 10 successful novels. Bang,
And
then-
if you
great
can,
advice.
if you can, pick novels by new authors,
yes.
because they are under much more scrutiny
Yes.
than established.
Yes.
Stephen King can write whatever he wants, and Stephen King,
Right,
I
that's
worship
very
you.
true.
I love your books. So I'm not saying that he can write crap. He can't, but he
can get away
he
with
could start
it.
a story with weather and get away with it. I can't.
There's no
Right,
merit
'cause
to
he's Stephen
it
King.
was
have-
the best of times,
Yep.
it was the worst of times.
It was a dark and
Yeah.
stormy night, right? So
Right.
yeah.
All right, we do have to wrap it up. So I guess we'll wrap it up. So in addition to the whole critique, we've also all noted notes on all of our pages individually, so you'll get that, and then you can touch base with us afterwards.
Awesome.
Okay?
Thank
Yeah,
you
I
so
think you have
much.
a wonderful
Thank you.
thing to work with.
Thanks for coming in. You
Wonderful
did.
It's a
work
great
with.
There's
story.
beautiful
Hopefully
imagery
this-
and sensory
Yes.
and lovely wording.
And hopefully this helped out. It did. So thanks so much for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. So thank you everyone else for joining us for this episode of Writers Infusion. We will see you next time. Keep writing.